TNBS, the NoseBleed section presents the podcast, Ep.2. I'm your host, Tommy, aka Millsy. And on this episode, I wanted to touch on and talk a little bit about DFS, Daily Fantasy Sports. I remember when I first started playing, it was about 6-7 years ago now, and I'd ask my friends, hey, do you play DraftKings, do you play FanDuel, and for the most part, everybody would say, no, I've heard of it, I've seen the commercials, but no, I don't play. Now when I ask them, they're, oh yeah, I'm on there, I play all the time, I play weekly, I play daily, varies by person, but for the most part now, everybody that has played fantasy sports plays DFS in some capacity. So to see that growth has been pretty incredible. I mean, not that it wasn't expected. I mean, when you have money involved, a chance to, sports involved, a chance to win money, you're not just putting it, winning back a signed football or a signed jersey, which is cool and all, but I'm sure everybody would rather have a chance at $100,000. So when you're putting the money into it, which kind of brings me into the only knock I really have on DFS, which is no late swap for NBA. I know that they did try to do some late swap tournaments, but they were too small on DraftKings. They weren't playable. I mean, you're not gonna attract people by having a $1 contest with 1,000 people and the top prize $100. It's not really a fair judge, because their reasoning, from what I understand, was that it was kind of like a test to see how many people would play and whatnot. But when you have tournaments that small, it's not appealing to people. It's not going to draw those people who did play late swap. They're not going to go play in a tournament that small or put that much of their bankroll into tournaments that are that small. So for me, that's really my only knock. There really isn't much you could do about it. I understand that. There's no simple solution. The only thing that I really have a problem with is the whole, well, you don't want to sit on your phone for 2 hours a night. Well, there's so many tools now where you can get updates and text sent right to your phone, letting you know when a player's out, so you don't have to spend that 2 hours on Twitter or researching, when it's family time or when you're going out to eat or you may be busy. I understand that. Life happens. That's everybody. And it's not right to say that these people shouldn't play just because they have a life. That's not right. But at the same time, it's also not fair to the people who put the time in and come up with lineups and take this very serious in terms of, some people do it for a career, some people do it for fun, but, there are people who do play DFS as a career, and for those people who spend the time researching and making their lineups, and then, somebody's ruled out after lock and those lineups are shot, that's not right to me. That's not fair to the people who are putting the time in. And not to say that, person A who has a family and something comes up and they can't be checking all the time on Twitter, not to say that they shouldn't be playing. They absolutely should be. Everybody should be able to play. I just think with the tools now, with getting updates to your phone, finding out when somebody is out, that you can put aside 5 to 10 minutes to make the necessary changes to your lineups. Not have to sit there all night. Just 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes over the course of 2-3 hours and just make a change. The only other solution that I've heard has been add 2 players that you draft, a guard and a forward, and maybe they're in a price range of $4,500 to $5,000 or $5,000 to $5,500. And if a guard's out, you have that guard slot into the guy who's out, and you get that way you're at least getting points instead of taking a 0. Same thing with if a forward's out and you put the other forward, he slots in for the guy who's out. The only issue with that is if you're starting Steph Curry and he's ruled out and he was 9,600, and then the guy that's going to replace him is JJ Barea at 5,200. You're going from a potential 40, 50 fantasy points down to 20 to 30 is what you can hope for. So it's like there's no straightforward solution. There's no simple solution. There's no, okay, you do this appeals to both sides. So it's kind of a tough spot to be in. I mean, I still play NBA. I just don't play as much, and it's not as fun as it used to be, because now I'm worrying about, oh, is this guy going to play, or I'm worrying about if somebody's going to be out, or if one of my lineups is going to be ruined because of that. But on the flip side of it, when it comes to NFL, DFS, I one small complaint. That's just the fact that they got rid of the 8:30 or the 8:30 game on Sunday nights on the main slate. That's my only knock. But I understand it, so it's not that big of a deal to me. But when it comes to NFL, I absolutely love DraftKings. I play every week. I'm researching players, teams. I'm doing everything all week up until Saturday when I actually put my lineups in. Saturday and Sunday morning. But with the current state of the NFL and so many penalties, games take forever. There's so many stoppages. There's so many timeouts. It's just the game of football isn't what it used to be. Main thing for me is the penalties. Every big hit now is a penalty. I understand wanting to protect players, and I understand making sure no hits to the head, nothing like that, and I'm in a full agreement with that. But when you see an offensive player going over the middle, not aware of his surroundings, and he gets leveled, he'll get hit here, shoulder to shoulder, and he'll get rocked, and his head will, jolt back, and it looks worse, and it looks bad. But the defensive player didn't do anything wrong. He was making a play, as was the offensive player. Just so happens that the offensive player wasn't aware. So to a certain extent, it's too much protection by the referees and too much protection from the NFL. If they were truly, truly concerned with player safety, they would get rid of the Thursday night games. The Thursday night games, the quality of football is bad, and that's no knock on the players. You have 3 days of rest, and then you got to go play another football game. How's your body supposed to fully recover in that time? And then go out and play at a high level 3 days later when your body's still recovering. So if they were truly, truly serious about that, they would get rid of the Thursday night games. I think they're trying to save face at this point, but it might be a little too late. I mean, I know there's a lot of other issues going on with, the politics and whatnot, but I don't talk about that. That's not stuff that affects the field. That's not stuff that happens on the field. That's outside stuff. That's not part of the game. So I stay away from the politics stuff. But with DFS football, it keeps you into those games when, it might be a little hard to watch, or it might be a rough patch where, there's a couple bad penalties that are kind of take you out of it a bit. But when you're playing DFS and you still have something invested in the game, you're still going to watch. So for me, I'm a Jet fan, as you can see. So we've had some bad years over the past couple of years. So it's been some long seasons, to say the least. So DFS has come in handy then. Like when the Jets season is done with, instead of just saying, oh, all right, I'm going to just watch football casually, I still have something invested in it when I play DFS. I still get into the games. I might get into the Cleveland Browns versus the Tampa Bay Bucks because I have somebody in the game and that lineup's doing well. So it's good for the NFL as well as it's good for fans. And it's just, there's something about the process of DFS, the research, the making the lineups, you go through your lineups and say, okay, I have this person. Okay, I don't have this person in any lineups. You might hop in another one just to try and get another person you like that weekend in. But it's just, there's so much involved into it. There's so much that goes into the process of creating teams and picking a player. It's just, it's a sport in its own right, to be completely honest with you. Yes, it's not an athletic sport. Competition, I guess, would be the best way to put it, which it is, but it's just fun. And then you're competing against other people too. It's not against a computer who can, you don't know the algorithm that they use to come up with something or come up with their lineups. You have people who are picking lineups, so you have that human element of it. And then you can see, this person played their favorite teams, the Falcons, and the Falcons went off that week, and that person won a tournament. They're not a big DFS player, but they're a Falcons fan, and the Falcons went off. So they ended up winning a tournament. That to me is that's cool to see, and that's part of what I think draws so many people into DFS. You know, that feeling of you are a general manager. You know, you have a salary cap to fit everybody into. Each week it's a different team, so each week it's a different strategy. And you know, you may one week focus on try and get good running backs. The next week you might focus on wide receivers. So it's kind of like you really are building a team, and over the course of a season, even though it's different players each week, it's the same. You're trying to win. It's not just like you're winning bragging rights either. You're winning money, which who doesn't want to try and win some money? Especially with sports. That's the shit. So, I mean, another thing I really love about DFS personally is them bringing back college football. Now, there's so many teams in college football that it's hard to stay up on everything, but one of my favorite things, I'll do a couple lineups for the 12 o'clock games and then the 4 or 3:30 and the 7, 8 o'clock games. I'll do a couple lineups for them. But my favorite is the 10:30, because that's when the 10:30 games. That's when I really sit down, start working on my DFS teams. We'll start inputting, all my lineups in, doing last little bits of research, checking the last little injury reports, and I'll have that on in the background. And I don't play college DFS as serious as I do NFL or NBA. It's just more so fun for me when it comes to college football, because I'm watching the games anyway. This way it kind of brings me in more to follow it more and to pay more attention, which you got to remember, these are kids chasing their dreams, and a lot of them, this is the end of the road for them. So if I can support just by watching, and I'm going to do that. So I'm going to be watching the games anyway, so throw in the DFS aspect of it. And then when, it keeps me out of trouble, to be honest. Instead of going out, partying, whatever it may be, on Saturday nights, I'm home working on DFS and watching college football, which I can tell you now keeps me out of trouble. Not that I'm a troublemaker anyway, but... But yeah, so college DFS, I really like that they brought that back on DraftKings. Again, I understand it's hard to kind of come up with, do the salary caps for players each week and whatnot, just because there's so many. But I think if they just focus on the top 25, the top 50 best teams, and then, the main teams from the SEC, ACC, Pac-12, all that, and they focus on those teams, I think for the most part, it should be successful, because there's something like 392 teams or 376 teams, something like that. So that is a lot, and that's too much for DFS people to expect to stay up on that many teams. So I understand originally too why they got rid of it, because it was a lot, and then you kind of want to have a foolproof plan, so to speak, when reintroducing it, which I have faith in DraftKings when it comes to the college football, because I had asked them about it a year ago and said, is there any plans on bringing college football back? It was a year or two ago, and they had said, not at the moment, unless we hear a high demand for it. For the most part, it's not in our plans. Then, obviously, this past year it was reintroduced, and it was also introduced on Yahoo, which is another good DFS site if you do play and you haven't played on there. They do allow late swap for NBA still. Tournaments aren't quite as big as FanDuel or DraftKings, but they're still, they're good tournaments, and they still allow late swap. Just a different kind of pricing. So instead of $5,500 or $9,600 for a player, you're paying $9 or $18 or $36, as opposed to the $5,500. But for me, daily fantasy has done a lot. I mean, it's been a pretty big part of my life the past couple years. Like I said, I've played for about 6 or 7 years, but the last 4 or 5 years I've kind of taken that next step to try to take it serious. Not become a professional player, but where I'm putting in 100 lineups every Sunday, or I'm putting in 15 to 20 lineups for NBA every day. So as you'd expect, it takes up a lot of my time, and sports have always been a big part of my life since I was a little kid. And there's baby pictures of me walking around in a Giants uniform and a Giants helmet, or a Jets jersey. So I've been a fan of sports since I can remember, and being able to play DFS has actually expanded my love of sports, which you could probably expect, because like I said earlier, you get more invested into it. So you're invested in players more so than teams. So you end up having more players that you like, and what that does is then you'll research that player. You'll get the backstory on them, so you'll learn things about them too. And then to see some of these backstories, it's very relatable. Which a lot of athletes get the reputation of being rich and snobby and all that, but a lot of them come from very humble beginnings, and to see them talk about their journey, or to see loved ones or family members or good friends talk about their journey and how they've helped other people in the community, or how they've helped people get out of poverty or get out of bad situations. It's very relatable for a lot of people. They just don't take the time to look into and truly come to know these players. They just look at maybe they're a big shit talker on the field, so they look at that and say, oh well, why are they playing like that? They're classless, or they're a thug, or they're this or that. First of all, you can't judge somebody by how they play on the field, especially when it comes to football, because first of all, it's competition. Second of all, it's a violent competition, and your goal defensively is to try to hit the other person as hard as you can, knock the ball loose. On offense, you're trying to make that person miss, or you're trying to get past them. So you can't judge these players by what they do on the field. And then one thing that I can't stand is when people get judged on their post-game comments. Like Richard Sherman, I believe it was 4 years ago, after they beat San Francisco and everybody was going crazy over his comments. I personally loved it because that was raw emotion to me. That's normally, us as fans, we don't get to see that. That's normally the stuff that stays on the field. But to see that, to me, that was absolutely awesome, because, like I said, you normally don't get to see that kind of raw emotion. And then a lot of people take that as anger, or hateness, or he's hateful, or they take it as hate speech, whatever you want to, or he shouldn't be talking like that, whatever it may be. But you got to remember, that's raw emotion. You're playing, your adrenaline's pumping. You just won a very competitive, tough fought game. Now you're going to the Super Bowl. There's going to be some emotion after that. So that's one thing that I can't stand when it comes to that, because I personally love to see that stuff. That's the heart. That's the heartbeat of sports. That's the pulse of sports. Is that emotion? Without emotion, sports would just be, boring. Nothing. They wouldn't be close to what they are today. And to tie it in with DraftKings, to tie it in with daily fantasy, that's kind of my field, my arena. That's where I get to showcase my talent, so to speak. So when I've done pretty well with NBA. I've won a couple NBA tournaments. I've come in second and third in a couple. NFL, I haven't won an NFL. I have done pretty well in NFL, especially the last 2 years where I've really started to take NFL a bit more serious. Last season was a pretty good winning season for me. I had a really good, I can't remember the exact week, but I think it was Denver at Kansas City. It was the 8 o'clock game, and I had stacked that game in my lineups, and that game went to overtime because 2 missed field goals. One went off the upright, and then in overtime it ended up going to like 2 minutes left or 3 minutes left in overtime because of another missed field goal that would have won it. So that game just kept going. I kept stockpiling points from that game, and that ended up being my best week that season. I think I ended up winning some like a couple hundred, some like 400 or 500 that week. So I've done okay when it comes to playing it. I just like the being able to be part of it. That's my field at this point. That's where I get to showcase my talents. That's where it's something I enjoy, that I can do, and I could potentially win money doing it. And who doesn't want to win money? I had started off on FanDuel. That was where I initially got into the whole thing, into DFS, was with FanDuel. Played on FanDuel for about a year, and I remember Eric Bledsoe he wasn't questionable. This was back when he was on Phoenix. Wasn't questionable, nothing. And this was about the 3rd time in 5 days someone had been ruled out after lock, and I said I had enough. And I left FanDuel for DraftKings. DraftKings had late swap at the time, and I loved it, and I was doing pretty well. Then they switched, and I stopped playing as much. Life happened. I just got busy. I got a new job, so I had been busy, and I wasn't liking the no late swap. So I was, I kind of had to adjust. And they also added another, what was it? I think it was the guards, and then there was like a utility spot. Oh, there was a position, I can't remember what it was, but there was a position that they added, and I had trouble adjusting to that and the no late swap. But ultimately I did, and now I've been back playing, and I'm amazed to see the growth of DFS. You take a look at Roto Grinders. They're a website and podcast designed specifically for DFS, every sport DFS. I personally follow Roto Grinders. I'm a big fan of Roto Grinders. I listen to their podcasts. I listen, being a DFS player, I'm not hard-headed and just, okay, I'm going to listen to my advice only and that's it. I listen around, and if I agree with some advice or I hear a stat I like or something I wasn't aware of, then, I'll pick up on that and I'll apply that to when I'm making my teams. But I just like to hear other people's opinions when it comes to DFS and when it comes to players and whatnot. Because that too is also applied to betting, sports betting. And that's another thing I enjoy doing. More so picking games pools where you pick the teams each week with the spread, and over the course of the season you get your record, and at the end of the season whoever has the best record wins the pot. So I play in those as well. So following those DFS shows and listening to those DFS shows, you get some insight on players in the games that you may not have thought of yourself. So I'm not one of those cocky, I know all, I'm the only one I'm going to listen to. No, I'm going to listen around. I also just enjoy listening to DFS talk and sports talk. So I listen around. But we're going to be having a show on this upcoming Friday, tomorrow, and it's going to be every Friday for the course of the NFL season. We're going to pick every game each week, straight up, with the spread and the over-under. And then at the end of the show, depending on how many people are on, we're going to do a couple friendly, player bet. Say my guest host, or my guest likes the Jets over the Lions, but I like the Lions over the Jets. So, we'll do a friendly bet of that, and then we'll keep tracking at the end of the year. We'll see who is the best. And Saturdays, every Saturday during the course of the NFL season and the playoffs, we're going to be doing a DFS show where we go game by game, break it down, talk about who we like, who we don't like, some values from each game, and then at the end of that, we'll do some player matchups. So say my guest likes Odell Beckham Jr. over DeAndre Hopkins this week, so he'll take Odell, I'll take DeAndre, and then we'll just kind of keep a record of that throughout the course of the season. But Saturdays at 9 o'clock Eastern will be the DFS show, and Friday 8 o'clock Easterns will be the Football Pick'em podcast. And that's about it. Thanks for joining me. Not sure, episode 3 will be out sometime next week. And if you play DFS, keep playing. If you don't play, now's the time. I've been your host, Tommy, aka Millsy, and this has been episode 2 of the podcast. Thanks for joining me.